So as we think about how we go about rebuilding Africa, I am left to wonder about what we are teaching at our schools. Because the great MLK told us something about the function of education, that it is the function of education to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that, in his opinion, is the goal of true education. And I came across an article in Guardian that captures the essence of history, why it's important for us to teach history, to understand history, to engage with history. Now, many of you know that I'm not biased in any way in favor for history because I am not a trained historian. I'm actually a trained scientist, but I've come to realize that history is so important in our lives, and it has to be central to our education. And so what do we gain from history? It is the material culture of the past. It helps us understand our lost societies. It helps us understand how civilizations rose and fell. It provides us a collective memory. It gives us a connection to place, to time, and to community. And I want to submit that Africa seems to be the only society with the richest history, but the people don't take history very seriously. That is what it appears to me, and we are changing that. In that same article on Guardian, here's a quote: "The destruction of the past, or rather, of the social mechanisms that link one's contemporary experience to that of earlier generations, is one of the most characteristic and eerie phenomena of the late 20th century. Most young men and women at the century's end grow up in a sort of permanent present, lacking any organic relation to the public past of the times they are in." Again, highlighting the eeriness, the danger of not teaching history, of not reminding ourselves of who we are. Because if we don't know where we came from, it's going to be pretty darn difficult for us to move forward. And that is what we are trying to do at our university. We are infusing history into everything and culture into everything we teach. And you know, we talked about teaching as being the most important human endeavor. We say teaching is so important that it helps shoulder other kinds of institutions, be it legal institution, political institution, economic institution. Teaching and education is what helps lay the foundation for how these other institutions evolve. And again, I think in Africa, we have not taken our educational system very seriously. We have not taken it, given some real thought about how we are teaching and what we are teaching at our schools. And I believe that history allows us to teach effectively because human beings respond to stories. That's one way to think about it. We respond so well to stories. So could you imagine if you are teaching architecture to people, students, and instead of jumping right straight into the architecture, you begin with a story of a man from antiquity, an African, by the name of Imhotep, who historians have accorded so many titles. You know, he is accorded the title of Prime Minister, the title of the first medical doctor, and the first architect, Imhotep, from ancient Egypt, the name meaning come in peace. So I really want to keep my talk here very short and then welcome you to answer the same question. What should we teach at school? What should we be learning at school? So here is my submission. Here's just a couple of examples. I'm going to share one biography and then another biography, and I'll open it up for you to share your thoughts on what we should be teaching. So Imhotep, Prime Minister of Pharaoh Djoser in the 3rd dynasty. Okay. Now, later on in the years, scribes poured libation to him before they started writing. That was the honor that was accorded to this man, to Imhotep. And the Greeks even identified him and deified him as the god of healing because of his pioneering work in medicine. But I mentioned architecture earlier. Now, because of the durability of the first pyramid which he built, which he constructed, again, historians credit him to be the inventor of stone architecture. So imagine we teach our young this biography of someone from Africa. Whether we would teach this biography to students who are on their way to learning medicine or architecture or philosophy, I think it will go a long way in instilling some confidence in them when they can see that their ancestors had paved the way for them to follow suit. So again, Imhotep was considered a philosopher, an astronomer, and the father, the true father of medicine. You may have heard some other people being touted as the father of medicine. Well, they really have to trace all the way back to Imhotep because he laid the foundations. And here is some of his work. Some of his work is right here for us to enter, for us to engage and enjoy. So now, if you think about those who came even after Imhotep, I'm talking about people like Microbius, who is Roman, or other Europeans. They had a lot of things to say about Imhotep. Microbius said Plato followed the Egyptians, the parents of all sciences, who placed the sun between the moon and Mercury. So this man and the people of his time were studying astronomy way before it became popularized. Edwards said of him that it is impossible to divine with any certainty the archetype by which Imhotep was guided when designing. In other words, Imhotep was second to none. And George Stratton had this to say of a Greek god, a Greek god of medicine, or Greek god of healing. The Greek god of healing was but a descendant of the Egyptian one. We often speak of Hippocrates, and we like to call him father of medicine. And what George Stratton was saying is that we often call somebody else Hippocrates. And those of you who are medical doctors on the platform, you might have taken the Hippocratic oath of medicine when you became a medical doctor, when you were sworn in as a medical doctor. You took that oath, the Hippocratic oath, to say, I am going to do good to humanity. I'm going to help heal people. I'm not going to use my knowledge to harm others. That was the oath you took. Well, George Sartre is saying here that we often speak of Hippocrates, but indeed the Greek god of healing was but a descendant of the Egyptian one. Who was he referring to? He was referring to Imhotep. So Imhotep is thought to have diagnosed and healed over 200 diseases in his lifetime, including tuberculosis, gallstone, arthritis, and many others. He also performed surgery, and he may have also founded the first school of medicine in Memphis, Egypt, ancient Egypt. So this is something I think, in my opinion, we should be teaching at school. Here's another woman or another doctor. This doctor, Pesafet. Pesafet was the first female doctor or medical professional ever recorded in history, in the history of humanity. Shouldn't we be teaching this in schools? Shouldn't our daughters be learning about, and our sons be learning about Pesafet? And when they looked at the writing, they translated her title as the overseer of doctors. See? And one thing that we find also in ancient Egypt, way back in time, in antiquity, was that women actually enjoyed high social status as men. Okay? And so in ancient Egypt, we actually found there were more than 100 prominent female physicians. We're just talking about the physicians alone. More than 100 of them. And Pesafet was one of those female physicians in ancient Egypt. I would like to talk more about Africans and how ancient Africans dealt with women in status, how we related with women in status. It's not like what we see today, where women seem to be subjugated. No, women were elevated in many African societies, and that is something we should embrace again. And we find that happening in Rwanda today. In Rwanda today, to my understanding, about 60% or so of the House of Senate, their version of the Congress, is female. And I think that has a lot to do with the strong leadership and the strong community sense that we see in Rwanda. Rwanda is becoming a good and a shining example for many African countries. So let me stop there and ask you to chime in. What should we teach in school? And think about history, yes, but also even think about stories from your own village. Think about biographies from your own place. We should bring those things into the curriculum and teach them. I'm going to be taking notes, so I'm going to shut up and listen to what you have to say about what else you believe we should be teaching. Now, keep in mind, we want to keep it positive. This is no time for complaining. We understand all the issues. We want to talk about empowering. How do we empower ourselves, and how do we bring out stories and biographies, events that we can listen to, we can engage and interact with to become empowered?